Nice background.
My room got messy one time and I just set this and I completely forgot about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to put one of my old set pictures on there, but I got to figure out how to do it. I'll put a photo from Pirates or something.
It's really easy. It's just in like the camera settings.
I attempted it yesterday, but it still kept my my live image on top of the photo that I put in. So I don't know what I did wrong. I'll figure it out. It's low tech. It's the least of my problems. Well, let's see who we get here. What do we got? 10 folks so far. I got to make sure I'm recording. Something went wrong yesterday and we lost the recording. So, ooh, you've gone alpha channel. You're all green.
I am?
Yeah. Your whole
Well,
thumbnail turned green. It's a look.
yeah, I mean, you've heard of this.
Good. I'm recording. Good. Very important. Where is Aldo? Is Aldo in this class? I don't see Aldo's name. Okay, well, it's almost time to get going here. Thirteen out of 60. That's a 13 out of 65. Now we're getting into the low numbers. We're getting into the middle of the semester now. People are going to start disappearing on me. It's okay. That's why I record these things. Nina, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Did you see that I credited you for the week 1 video?
Yes, I appreciate that. I'm sorry about all of it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's it's weird because yesterday Zoom glitched and I didn't get the video or the XML file, the attendance document. So I don't know what's going on with all this tech. We got so much tech flying around here now, and there's glitches and errors and everything. So if it happens, guys, just send me an email. Let me know what's up. I'll fix it as soon as I can, and we'll stay on track. It's no big deal. That's why everything's recorded, so that you can go back and revisit these things. So now yesterday's video, I'm going to have to give them your guys' session from tonight, because their video I don't know what happened to it. It was there and then it was gone. I don't know what I did. So, all right. Ooh, 23. This is a good number. 23. Come on, 24. Give us one more. Well, that's 23, including me. So that's really 22. That's a good number. All right. One more minute and we'll fire this thing up. Okay. Everybody good? Everybody having a good afternoon, or had a good afternoon? Good. Very good. All right. So, there we go. There's always one. Okay. All right. So let's get this thing fired up here. So I'm going to share my screen now. And okay. So where am I? Here we go. I wanted to, whoops, admit. Yes. Thank you. What happened? Close that. It's this tab. Okay, so where are we now? Actually, I'm going to use this tab. Go to modules. We're in week 3. So let me close these things up. So we're going to talk about the camera department tonight. This is pretty easy stuff. You probably heard most of this before. I just want to give you my take, my understanding of these positions, who these people are and what their duties are. So you can see what a full-sized, fully functioning camera department might look like on a major feature. That way, when you guys are all super successful and you get on these big films, you'll know exactly who these people are and what they're doing. So we'll talk about camera department tonight. And all you've got for this week is a reading assignment, nothing else. I'm trying to like skip every other week with an assignment. I don't want to bombard you guys with a lot of stuff. Next week, we'll have a little assignment from the lecture. And then you guys have your cinematography papers that you're turning in. So I've noticed that a few of you are late. So get those into me as soon as you can. I have a public service announcement, however. So I sent out an announcement either this morning or yesterday afternoon. I don't remember which. Asking you guys to use naming conventions, proper naming conventions on your assignment submissions. Okay. So here's the deal. I have over 300 students this semester. Okay. And in many cases, these folks are expecting feedback for something they've handed in to me. Okay. In web courses, I can bulk download all the submissions from an assignment page. So, but when I do that, it just gives me whatever that file is by that extension. So if you haven't named the file properly, I may not know that it's from you. And if you haven't put your name anywhere else on that document inside the file for me to find, I may not know it's your assignment. Okay. And you won't get credit for it. Furthermore, it creates extra work for me if I have to open every document to find out who it belongs to and then rename the file myself so that in my hard drive, I can find your work at a glance by looking at all of the file names and looking for your last name and the assignment that I am concerned with. So since I don't want to do that extra work for over 300 people, I'm going to ask you guys to do what you should be doing all along, especially at the college level. And if this is the first time you're hearing it, I apologize. Your teachers have done you a disservice by not insisting that you do this when you submit files to us. Last name, first initial, the assignment number or the assignment name, and then put FIL2461 after that so I know it's from you guys. And maybe 0003 so I know it's section 3, or just 2461-3 would be fine as well. So I know that you're the section 3 class, not my section 1 class. Okay. Or section 2 class. And then when I bulk download stuff that you have turned into me, I will know which assignment is yours right away and I can go right to it and look at it. That's helpful if, for instance, you have a question about something or I gave you some feedback and you want to address that. When I go into my hard drive and open up that file under that week for that assignment, I go zip, zip right down to your assignment, open it up, bang, we start talking. If I got to search all over the place for it and it's creating extra time, then there has to be, somebody has to be responsible for that. And here's the deal. Anytime you create content out in the world, if you don't put your name on it, you're not going to get paid for it. So let that be the motivating factor. Especially if you're creating content that you're submitting to a client. Never send client a generically labeled file. It's unprofessional and it does not help anybody who's managing the assets to find the right stuff on a timely basis. So in those cases, a client will probably have a specific naming convention they want you to use because their editors are used to a certain labeling system, perhaps. In this case, for our class, I just want you to use what I sent out in the announcement. Last name, comma, first initial, assignment number or name, and then FIL2461-03, okay? And that will help me a great deal, okay? Thank you very much and good night. No, okay, so let's move on to the, can you see my screen okay? Good, thumbs up, good, awesome. All right, let's move on to the presentation. Ta-da. Okay, so here we are, we're week 3. This is a short thing, only 20 slides, so that's cool. Here is my ID photo for this week. This is a vintage photo, another vintage photo of a camera department somewhere in Hollywood in the, looks like probably the 30s, 40s maybe. Those are early Mitchell film cameras with what we called the Mickey ears film magazine on top because it looks like Mickey Mouse. This camera right here, you can see clearly is what we call a turret camera. It's got 3 lenses on the front, and the operator would just rotate the lens turret around until he is looking through the lens with the perspective that he wants. And then he uses his viewfinder to verify his framing. This is what a camera crew looked like 80 years ago, 90 years ago. They don't look much different now, except we don't wear these derby hats anymore. Nobody wears a tie to work, and we're shooting digital. So the cameras are different. The tripods are no longer made out of wood. And although we have some of those in the back room, in the equipment room here at UCF, we have some of the old Woody sticks, Woody standards, we call them. They're actually pretty cool. I think they got a lot of character, but they're not very practical nowadays for the cameras we're using. So they don't go out much anymore. This is a quote from my friend Chris Elliott. Says, people think that all cameramen do is just point the camera at things, but it's a heck of a lot more than that. And if you know Chris, you'll know that it's a very tongue-in-cheek statement and he's being a smartass, but it is true. You know, there's a lot more to it than simply pointing the camera at stuff and taking what you get, okay? The whole point of cinematography and being able to control the craft is so that regardless of what's in front of the lens, if it doesn't look right for our intention, if it doesn't fit our story, if we need to modify it in some way, that we have a number of different skill sets and tools that we can use at our disposal to affect the changes that we need or want so that our images resemble or work best for our story. Okay, this is all about being in control of your tools and your skill sets and your knowledge so that your images work precisely the way you want them to. Okay. But before we get into all of that, I just want to talk to you about the hierarchy of the camera department, who's in it, what's going on, what they're doing, and so forth. So we'll cover that here today, the positions and their respective responsibilities. Your reading assignment, which I will reiterate again at the end of the slideshow, is here. It's chapter 2B in the intro text, which is the big book that you all should have by now. This one here, okay? This is the Hosier book, the Hosier book, okay? So read chapter 2B. Okay, here we go. Alrighty. Yeah, let's look at this really quick. This sort of sets up what I'm gonna talk to you about next. So we'll take a look at it. It's part of a longer video. I've just clipped off the beginnings. It's kind of a nice intro, and then we'll get into it.
In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the crew positions in the camera department, what they do, and who they report to. The size of your camera crew is dependent upon both the budget of the production and the needs of that particular project. The benefit of having a larger crew is that it allows each person to focus more closely on their given task. And since they can really focus on that task, they can do a better job at it. So oftentimes the quality of the video goes up the larger the crew gets. But it's always a balancing act. Larger crews can also make logistics on set more difficult. The larger the crew can make for a more intimidating experience if your subject or the talent is not used to being in front of the camera. So having a bigger crew isn't always necessarily the best choice. If you need to have a smaller crew due to a smaller budget, or it creates a more friendly environment on set, or maybe it's just how you like to work, then that means that you have to shoulder more of the responsibilities of the different departments and the different roles upon yourself. So starting at the top, let's take a look at the roles and responsibilities of the camera department.
Want to see it all? Become a member. Okay, let's break it down. The director of photography, also known as the cinematographer. Okay, so I'm showing you the Apex Hollywood model, right? So we know that on documentaries, there might only be a couple of people, maybe only one person handling the camera. Okay, documentaries have a very small production footprint. Low budget commercials have a small production footprint. Independent films, oftentimes, you know, there might be a couple of people working camera and that's about it. I'm going to show you the major feature film footprint, and then you can, you know, sort of derive all models out of that, because this is as complex as it gets. Okay. And it's fairly common, believe it or not. Okay. So even television shows now in Los Angeles are so complex and so large, and they have so much money to throw around, that they have full-size camera crews as well now, whereas in the past it wasn't necessarily the case. So the director of photography, or the cinematographer, is going to be the head of this department. Figuratively, and in terms of the, you know, directing the visual content and making sure that it is, you know, adhering to that camera person's style, choices, and collaborating with the director, making sure that those images support the script and what the director's trying to say. In this particular shot, we've got Roger Deakins behind the camera, and he's setting up a shot. We call that an over, or over the shoulder is the full term. We just call it an over. And he's looking at the computer screen. It's a conversation that Judi Dench is having with somebody on the laptop. And so this is an insert of what she's seeing, or who she's talking to on the laptop. And it's lensed as an over the shoulder. Okay. So Roger likes to operate his own camera. Okay. In the heyday of Hollywood, in the studio days of Hollywood, when the studios were really powerful, the IEA used to insist that the director of photography not operate their own camera, and that those individuals would sit on set next to the director, and so that they could facilitate conversations with the director about what's happening with the image. And then the director of photography would simply, you know, ask people to, you know, do certain things or make certain adjustments based on, you know, what's happening with the discussion with the director. Over the years, that has evolved a little bit. Guys like Roger Deakins came out of the documentary side of the film business. And so he was used to, for the first, say, 20 years of his career, he was used to the small footprint of a documentary film or a very low budget independent film. So, you know, he didn't have a lot of help, which is kind of like the conundrum you guys face when you make your own film projects here at UCF. You don't necessarily have a full crew of people like you might have on a major television show or feature film. So as a result of that, Roger kind of, you know, matured in the craft, feeling comfortable behind the camera doing his own operating. And so it took lobbying on the part of individuals like Roger, also like, well, I'm going to show you Emmanuel Lebetsky next. He also likes to operate his own camera. There's a number of cameramen now, DPs, that will do their own operating, because the contracts no longer require that they have a separate camera operator to perform the composition and lensing duties exclusively. So the cinematographer can now operate and be the head of the department and so forth. And the whole reason kind of stems from the film generation. It's not so much a thing in the digital generation anymore, because we don't see optically through the camera and through the lens at what the lens is seeing. There's no longer a true analog relationship. What we're looking at when we put our eye to a viewfinder on a digital cinema camera is simply a really small monitor that's showing us an electronically generated image, which is in most cases far inferior to the monitor we have over in Video Village where the director's watching the shot happen. So it's a visceral thing that somebody who started in the industry working with film cameras and started by putting their eye to an eyepiece and watching the scene as it happens through the lens. Okay. And it's a habit that's really, really hard to break. Even as a lighting cameraman, as a gaffer, I used to love to light through the lens on the Panaflex because you're seeing through a system of mirrors. You're actually looking through a beam splitter and right through at what the lens is truly seeing. And when you bump the shutter on a film camera and the mirror starts going inside, you get a true sense organically of what that image is going to look like. And then you see all of your lighting kind of crush down and become the right ratios and densities and so forth. And you can really get a sense of what the scene is going to look like and your lighting and everything looking through the viewfinder. And I just always loved that. It always made me feel really comfortable. However, I've made the transition to digital fairly easily. And I've realized that, the images we have on our set monitors now are, hugely superior. And if we're shooting raw files or flat files in our cameras, and I'll explain what that is in a few weeks, if we're shooting images that have a preset parameter that when you look at the raw footage on a monitor doesn't look so good, we have guys called DITs, I'll explain you who those are in a minute, who can tweak that image for us while we're on set in real time. And we can see whatever color, special effects, and adjustments we would make in post. We can see those on top of the video image, like we call them lookup tables. And the digital imaging technician can show us a very precise image. So, if you're working with, true digital cinema cameras now in the age of digital cinematography, the tools and the monitors that we have now are really excellent. So I was able to make the jump, but a guy like Roger, who's been doing it far longer than I have, he's used to being there, watching the scene unfold in the viewfinder. He likes it. And, so he operates his own camera. Emmanuel Lubetsky feels the same way. In this shot, he's operating his own camera. I don't know what movie this is taken from, but he's another one who came up through the ranks of the small camera department, and the low budget films in Mexico and stuff, where they didn't have a big film crew. So he likes operating his own camera as well, with the exception of when they're using Steadicam. But he's really kind of famous now for all the handheld work he did on the film Children of Men, where he used an easy rig and he handheld the film camera for very long takes, and developed kind of a style, sort of a voyeuristic style, where the camera has almost becomes a character in a way, in the way that it sees the events that are unfolding in front of the lens. It's a very interesting feel. If you haven't seen Children of Men, I highly recommend it. The cinematography is excellent. So El Chivo, the GOAT, greatest of all time, as they call him, he likes to operate his own camera as well. But if they can afford it, if it's a full-blown union movie, they'll have a cinematographer and an operator on payroll. And whether that operator actually does any operating or not, they're still there per the contract, and they get paid, one way or the other. So a lot of times what'll happen on a major feature like that is there's multiple cameras anyway. So the camera operator might become the A camera operator or the B camera operator, and then the cinematographer will operate, the second camera on set, and they'll shoot, a couple of different lenses at a time to get, multiple pieces of coverage in half the time by using multiple cameras. So there's ways around everything. And in this day and age, it is no longer contractually, producers are no longer contractually obligated to hire a camera operator. We do need a first assistant cameraman though. So this particular guy, this is Larry, and he's checking the wireless follow focus system that he's got on the camera that's mounted in a Libra head that's gonna ride at the end of this techno crane, and they're gonna get some kind of big sweeping shot, right? And so he's not able to focus the lens and adjust the aperture on the camera because it might be 35 feet in the air swinging around on the end of the crane. So he's using this, looks like a Bartek remote control for the lens, and he can control the focus and the lens aperture via this big wheel on riding on the side. He can also start and stop the camera. This is called a microforce on this side, and it controls the record, start, and stop on the camera. And that red button right there is actually a toggle, and he can zoom the lens in and out by sliding it backwards and forwards. So he's got full control of the camera using this remote control rig, and he's just testing it out right now before they take a shot. This is also first AC in this particular frame. This is Roger Deacon's full-time first AC. His name is Andy Harris. Andy has been with Roger now for about 25 or 30 years, as I recall. You may be interested to know that yours truly, your own instructor, was Andy Harris's second AC on a TV show a million years ago. Back in the, the early 90s, I did a TV show, and Andy was one of the first ACs on it. Nice guy, very good at what he does, and he's still a first AC to this day because he's been on pretty much every movie that Roger has shot for the last 20 years. So these guys are a team. They work together all the time. This particular shot is behind the scenes from the film Skyfall. So pretty interesting. Okay, so we might be wondering what's in the AC's toolkit. So this is a video. I'm going to show you the first couple of minutes of it. This is talking about what a first AC might have in their ditty bag on set, tools and bits and bobs that they use to do their job. Also, a lot of these cinema cameras will come from the rental house with a lot of little accessories and stuff. And they can be a real, challenge to keep track of on set, little handles, little buttons, little knobs, and things that you might need to use to utilize or adjust the camera. And so the first AC will have what we call a ditty bag or an AKS bag on set. And he'll keep all of that stuff in it, as well as a few of the items that you're going to see here in this video. AKS, if any of you are curious, is an abbreviation for what we used to call the all kinds of shit bag. So there was all kinds of stuff in that bag, and we called it the AKS bag. So we usually would keep it handy. So if we were on a tripod on the set, I would place it, at the base of the tripod for the first AC so that he could get at his tools or whatever. If they were riding on the dolly, a lot of times I would keep the AKS bag with the rest of the camera cases on a camera cart somewhere within reach for me as a second AC to run and grab that stuff and bring it into the set if the first AC needed it. So let's take a look at this real quick and see what's in the first AC's ditty bag.
The first AC assistant camera belongs in the camera department. He is a key element in a film set because if he's good, he can push forward the whole crew, and if he's bad, he can cause major setbacks. His main responsibilities are setting up the camera, maintaining it along with the camera equipment and accessories. Also, he is the responsible person to pull focus when needed to follow action on set, and last but not least, to follow the instructions of the director of photography. But a first AC is nothing without his trusted toolkit. He can always be spotted in the set holding one big bag full of gadgets, tapes, filters, cables, tools, and other accessories. In this video, we will show you what he uses and how he uses it to do his job. So let's get to it. Firstly on our list is the AC's best friend, the monitor. The monitor is essential to him in order to always be spot-on focused, to look at the histogram as well as other color and camera settings. And if he's shooting outdoors, it's nice to have a hood for it. Secondly, we have the matte box. The matte box is the piece of equipment that goes in front of the camera, and its primary function is to control the unwanted light that comes into the camera, and the other one is to hold filters. Neutral density, polarizing, or others. He has to keep an eye out on what the director of photography wants to use, and then he sticks a little piece of tape on the matte box in order to know what filter is inserted. Next on the list is the most important piece of equipment for the AC. With the follow focus, he is pulling focus in order to follow the action on set, and he achieves that by going from one mark to another that he has already marked by counting the distance of the subject. And this takes us to the next item too. course, is the trusted tape measure that he counts the distance between the camera sensor and the actors. Now let's not forget about the most iconic tool in all of film history. The slate is a tool that the first AC brings on set but never uses it. It's the second AC's job, or sometimes the assistant director's. The slate is the tool that helps in post-production. It helps on syncing the sound and the image. Moreover, he can see information like who is the director of photography, and also if that shot was filmed in day or at night.
Okay, I'll stop it there and you guys can check out the rest of that video from Web Courses. It's embedded for you there. And see what other stuff they've got in their gadget bag. I want to talk to you about the second assistant camera person now. So we have the first assistant camera person, who is also oftentimes referred to as the focus puller, because that's their primary job. They're focusing the lens in the moment while they're capturing a scene on a data card or on a film, on a film magazine. And that's really what keeps the first AC busy most of the day. However, the first AC is also responsible for prepping all the gear in pre-production, making sure that all the camera equipment that the DP has ordered for the job is pulled and present in the package at the rental house before they even leave. Because what they'll do is they'll bring the camera truck, the transportation department will bring the camera truck right to the rental house. And as the first AC is checking off the gear and making sure everything is there and that everything works properly, they're going to load the camera truck with the camera gear, and they're going to take it to the first location or back to the production office for the start of shooting, back to the stage, whatever. So the first AC is really in charge of all of the equipment, which he will also delegate, or she will also delegate to the second AC and anybody else on the camera crew. But they're the ones that are going to take the heat if something's missing or something's broken, or if there's a piece of gear that was supposed to get ordered for special use on a particular day and it wasn't ordered, or a piece of gear that has to go back to the rental house so that it can be taken off rental. The first AC is coordinating those types of things. And the second AC is really trying to just help the first AC with all of those responsibilities. But the second AC has been given the primary responsibility of operating the slate for the camera. Okay. And so the slate has the name of the show on it, the name of the director on it, and the name of the cinematographer. And those are usually on the slate indelibly somehow. These days on a larger feature, they'll send the slates off to an engraver and they'll have the name of the show engraved right into the plastic slate, because you're using dry erase markers. And when you write on and then erase the marker, if the name of the show and the name of the DP and the name of the director are engraved, they'll, you can't rub them off. And that stuff's not going to change over the course of a movie anyway. So they get those engraved, and then they use dry erase for the roll or media card number, the scene number, and the take number, which they can then erase with and rewrite with dry erase markers. So the slate is a pair of sticks that you can see here on a hinge, and then the ID board itself. And the idea is the second AC is going to clap those sticks together, create a clicking sound that's a sync point for a separate audio recording, so they can match up the video that's taken by the camera and the audio taken by the separate sound recorder. And in post-production, they can line up the audio to the visuals, and the lip flap matches with the dialogue in the audio. So this is creating a sync point. Now there's software that'll do this automatically now, but it's not completely accurate. It can also create a sync point that will drift over long takes. So it's always good to get a standard analog sync point at the beginning or at the very end of a take, as a backup to any software systems that might be in place in post-production by the editors. It's also nice to see that ID board at the beginning of every clip, so that if, for instance, say the assistant editor is scrubbing through a hard drive through bulk files of clips looking for a particular shot, what they're really doing is reading all the ID boards to look for the scene and take number of the shot that the editor is trying to pull and add into the, into the timeline. So it's nice to have these ID boards at the head of every shot. If you can't get it at the head of a shot for some reason, And sometimes it involves special effects or stunts where the cameras are rolling a long time ahead of the action because there's some kind of rig or setup that has to take place. They'll smack the sticks at the end of a take and get what we call a tail stick or a tail marker on a scene, and then the AC will just turn the slate upside down and smack the sticks upside down, and that's a visual cue for the editor that it's a tail slate, and they'll know, the editor will know there's something going on at the head of that clip, a pre-roll we call it, waiting for a stunt or waiting for something. A lot of times pyrotechnics will have a pre-roll on the cameras. Stunts, like when they're jumping and rolling cars, a lot of times what we would do is we'd get the camera all set up and it's angled up, sitting on maybe on a sandbag or something, and we have it framed so that the car is going to enter frame and jump over the, like on the Dukes of Hazzard when the car jumps over the dirt berm and it kind of flies through the air. So we get it all framed up, but we've got to hit the record button on the camera, and then the AC's got to run out of the shot and get to safety. And then when he's clear and everybody knows that everything's good to go, the director will say action, the car will come through the shot. The camera's been rolling for 30, 40, 50 seconds already. So there's a huge pre-roll at the head of that shot. And then at the end, when the car is clear and the first AD says all clear, the second AC or the first AC will run in, tail marker that camera, and then turn off the record button. And that's a tail slate for a stunt shot. And the same thing with pyrotechnics. A lot of times they'll pre-roll the cameras for pyrotechnics. And then when everybody's clear of the shot, the special effects guys will toggle the actuator and blow stuff up or whatever they're going to do. And then you run in and you tail slate the camera and you hit the stop record. So you have a tail slate on a sequence like that as well. So there's lots of reasons why you might have, tail sticks on it, but most of the time the second AC is doing it at the beginning of a shot. He creates a sync point, claps it, leaves the board in for an extra moment so the editor can read the information, and then he dives out of the shot at the, on the shortest route possible out of the shot so he can get clear of the camera and they can start acting. So this guy is the second AC. So when he's not doing this, if it's a film job, the second AC is probably going to be running mags back and forth to the camera truck and either downloading and reloading them himself or handing them off to a loader whose sole job would be to download magazines that have film that's been exposed and canning that up and sending it to the lab, and then reloading those magazines with fresh film stock and running that into the set so they can use it to record the scene. If it's digital, then the second AC is managing the media cards. He's managing, or she is managing, what's been recorded on those cards using camera reports and things that we'll look at later in the semester. So the second AC's job basically is clerical, and he's got this one vestigial analog duty, which is to smack the sticks on the slate. So I don't know if you guys know the folks over at Film Riot. These goofy guys make these neat little videos. I've spoken to Ryan a few times, and he loves the fact that that I use his films in class. So this is Ryan Connolly from Film Riot, and he's going to talk to you really quick about the second AC.
Today on Film Riot, we second AC. Welcome to Film Riot, the show that takes mystery out of the effects techniques, going to some of your favorite Hollywood films. I'm your host, Ryan Conley. And the second AC stands for Second Assistant Camera. The second AC works for the camera department right under the first AC, aka the focus puller. A second is in charge of a lot of things involving the camera card, batteries, camera builds, and so on. But today, I just want to cover what are three of the top responsibilities for a second AC, as whispered to me by the sexy Justin Robinson, who has worked on 10 feature films. getting right into it with slating, the slate's purpose is syncing video with audio, which is a vitally important job, especially on bigger shows. Filmmaking is all about organization, and organization is about communication. A good second will organize and communicate clearly and effectively with how he calls out his slate and how he writes on it.
Victor, 57 Bravo, take 2, marker.
Justin has even told me that he's heard sound mixers verbally thank a second AC for how they clearly and precisely called out a slate. On smaller unpaid sets, this is a job that's often passed down to the greenest of crew members, usually as a last resort. And slating can be a foreign tongue at first, looking at all the random numbers and whatnot, but there is a method to the madness. When you break it down, the slate is simply the editor's personal translator for each shot. You're telling them this clip is on roll 23, and it's the third take of scene 11, and so on. And the second AC is going to work closely with the script supervisor, who will help with the continuity of each scene in slate. Being a second AC is about being alert and aware of each scene. Without this awareness, you're probably not second AC material. You have to make sure that every piece of information on your slate is the exact data needed for the editor. When you change a card, the roll number on the slate changes with it. In the rush hour of filmmaking, little details like this can be overlooked, and mistakes can quickly pile up if you're not keeping tabs on everything. Again, a good script supervisor should catch something like that so you can make note of it in your camera report. As far as slate placement goes, most people think you just place it somewhere in the air, smack it, and you're done, which is not the case at all. You always want to fill the frame as best you can.
I'm going to leave it there, and you guys can finish this up at your leisure. This is also embedded on web courses. What I want to talk to you about, though, is something very specific, and that is regarding the information that's on the slate. I don't know if you can see it okay with that. Oh, crap. With the play button in the way. Let's see if I can bring that frame back here.
Today on Film Right, we second AC.
Or you know what? Maybe we can just look at the image of the slate here. Okay. I don't know. Can you guys see this slate okay? Maybe I can enlarge it a little bit here for a sec. Hold on.
I can see it.
Let's do that. Okay. So here's the second AC, and he's got this information on the slate, right? So here is the roll number. Okay. So this is, what is this? This looks like an Alexa camera. So it's that's a red one. Okay. So this is a red one camera. So it's a digital camera. So this is not really a roll. Roll means film roll, but they use that same box to denote media number. So with the red one, the original red cinema camera, they had what they called red mags, which were nothing more than proprietary hard drives that docked right on the camera. And so this is a camera. The A stands for a camera. So clearly they had more than one camera on this shoot. If they were doing a B camera shot in this box, it would be B and then a number for whatever media card they were on for the B camera. In this case, they're on media drive 31. So they have used at least 31 data cards or red drives on this shoot so far. And this is camera drive A31. So camera drive A31 is going to have a series of shots on it. So on a red drive, you know, they might get 30 minutes of recorded coverage based on whatever codec and compression they're using at the time. So let's call it, say, 20, 30 minutes of content, right? So that's not the whole movie, clearly. That might be 10 2-minute takes, and that's it. And they had to take that mag out of the camera and put a new hard drive into the camera, okay? But A31 is going to be particular to a certain number of shots that were taken on the A camera on this day, which is on the slate, whatever that date is. And so all of that will be referenced on the camera reports that the second AC is keeping track of. You can kind of see how the slate's dark right here. It's a white translucent plastic slate, right? And any backlight makes the whole board kind of glow, and you can clearly read whatever's written on it. But when you tape a camera report to the backside, it makes a shadow, and that's what this dark area is on the slate right here. He's got a camera report taped to the backside, and that's where he's keeping track of each shot, how long it was, what the scene number was, and how many takes, and if there's any specific information like what lens they were using, filters, if they were off speed or shooting high speed, what was the frame rate, whether or not there was sound or no sound, and maybe other directions for the editor or for the lab if you're shooting film, like push process or pull process or hold for, hold development for phone call from the DP, for instance, or special notes to the lab. So the camera report taped on the back side of this has a lot of information regarding the shots that have been taken on this A31 red mag. Okay. Now there's a cadence that the second AC is going to use. So we saw in the Film Riot video, their slate said, what did it say? It said V57F take one, right? So the second AC is going to use a phonetic alphabet or a radio operator's alphabet to say that information when the audio is rolling, to have an audio marker as well as the sync point at the beginning of a clip. And it's more important if you're shooting film, but it's also valuable when you're shooting digital video because it's an audio reference to what's on that clip, and the editors use that for cataloging and keeping track of all the footage. So on V57 take one, the second AC would say Victor 57, scene Victor 57, Franklin, which is F in the series of pieces of coverage that they're taking of a scene. We'll talk about that later this semester. Victor 57, Franklin, take one, and then smacks those sticks, okay? And the reason they do that is because if the scene was called V57 and the piece of coverage has gone all the way A, B, C, D, E, F, so it's the sixth shot in line of a series of coverage, okay? We start with a master, then we go with a submaster, then we go with this first series of overs and singles. So we might be on the second close-up of the second actor in this series of shots, and we're up to Alpha, Baker, Charlie, David, Edward, Franklin, okay? Take one. So it's scene Victor 57, coverage piece Franklin, take one. And all that information is for the editor, okay? So when the editor is looking at scene 57, either on a flatbed with film or on an NLE with digital, and they're trying to decide which pieces to use in what order to make scene 57 kind of come alive and flow, right? They might want to know, let's take a look at where's all the coverage for scene Victor 57, and the assistant editor will pull up, a couple of different files from maybe a couple of different hard drives, and they'll start taking a look at the clean singles are Baker and Charlie, and then the overs are David and Edward, and the close-ups are Franklin and George. So they want to look at the clean singles. They're looking at the Baker and the Charlie clips. They want to look at the over-the-shoulder shots. They're looking at the Edward and the Franklin clips. They want to look at the inserts. They might be looking at the V57X clips, insert of a watch, insert of a cocktail glass, whatever. All of that stuff is information for the editor, and it's kind of code. The script supervisor is keeping track of this code. The second AC is keeping track of this code. The second AC will go to the script supervisor at the beginning of a shot, ask the script super, what scene number is this? What code do you want to use? What shot are we starting with? The script supervisor will tell the second AC, and that's what they fill out on the slate. And then the second AC just keeps track of the take numbers, keeps track of any notes about filters and lenses on the back on the camera report. And if in the middle of shooting this sequence, they have to change magazines or change hard drives, he's also going to change the roll number on the slate. Okay. And all that information is on a camera report in triplicate or quadruplicate. Okay. And one of those copies goes with the media or the film stock to the editor. Okay, so that when the editor's cutting the movie together, they have all the notes that were taken on set and in real time from the second AC. They'll also have a set of notes from the script supervisor. And this is how the editors are piecing your movie together. Okay, and it all kind of starts right here with this little slate board, this, unassuming little dry erase board that seems like an afterthought in many cases, but really it's very, very important. If you shoot on a movie, a major motion picture, they're going to shoot a lot of film, or they're going to consume a lot of media. Okay. I can remember one of my first jobs was a TV series, and I was a loader. And on that TV series that year, it took a year to shoot that show. We shot 1.2 million feet of film, and I loaded every foot of that into and out of magazines and boxed it all up and sent it to the labs for development. And that's a lot of film. In context, so that was 11 months of shooting a TV series, 6 days a week, half-hour episodes. In contrast, on My Girl, they also shot 1 million feet of film, okay? But it was a feature film. And it was so My Girl, I think, is like a 90-minute movie. So in an hour and a half movie, they shot as much film as we did on a TV series that was 11 months. And what did we shoot? I think we shot like 35 episodes that year. Okay, so a lot of content, in other words. And now and film had to be developed, which had built-in costs, right? And since it was the film stock itself was very expensive, if you shot 1.2 million feet of film, that was all the best stuff, right? Nowadays with digital, they roll camera on almost everything because you never know when an actor is going to give you a unique performance in a rehearsal, and they're going to wish they had given it to you in the real take when the director wants to record and is calling action, and they don't have it because it was done in the rehearsal. Well, now in the digital era, a lot of times they'll shoot the rehearsal. Okay, Larry Sher shot virtually everything on Joker. So that camera was rolling the minute Joaquin walked into the room. Okay, because it was digital. There's no more film stock to buy, and there's no development costs involved with it. And it's a reusable, airy hard drive. So, there's no built-in costs anymore to creating these images other than the personnel and the post-production and all of that. But the built-in costs of film stock and developing are no longer there. So they roll the camera constantly. So you have even more footage. So the total footage count on the Joker might have been 3 or 4 million feet, which is a lot of video because, it's essentially free, right? So there's a lot to keep track of. And these editors have, hundreds or thousands of clips that they're trying to organize in post-production and use for the edit. So this little duty right here that seems kind of like an afterthought is in reality a really, really important job that needs to be sorted out and maintained on the set. So the second AC's job is pretty important on a big feature film. Okay. There is a video here that it's about 15 minutes long. So I don't want to show it to you here. I'll say, go ahead and check it out on your leisure time. It's how to properly slate. And this is from a retired second AC. So it's the information is pretty reliable. And he'll teach you everything that you need to know about how to properly slate your film for your projects. Okay, so we talked a long time about the second AC, but there's another person on the camera crew. You can refer to that person as an additional second AC or what we call a camera loader, okay? So the second AC might come a point where the second AC gets caught on set because the first AC is running around. There's 2 cameras going. In that case, the first AC is on one camera. The second AC might have to step up and start focusing for the second camera that gets pulled out. And that leaves the loader to deal with all of the media or deal with loading the magazines and then bringing stuff into the set to make sure that they constantly have recording media, whatever that is, to work with as they're going through the call sheet and shooting all the shots they need to get that day. So you might have an additional individual called the loader who is most of the time on the camera truck, either downloading something or formatting something or loading magazines and bringing them back to the set so that the shooting crew can continue to capture the images. All right. In this particular shot, they're showing a film loader That looks like a 400-foot magazine that they're putting onto a Panaflex Millennium camera. And so he's either putting it on or taking it off, and I can't really see his loop. The loop would be, it looks like it's intact right here below the magazine. If the loop is intact, then this shot would be the loader actually loading the camera. And if the loop was torn or broken, that would be because when you finished with a film magazine, we always tore the loop so it couldn't be loaded back on the camera and multiple exposed by accident. So if the loop is torn, that means the magazine is ready to be downloaded into a film canister and sent to the lab. So this looks like he's in the process of loading the camera and he's bringing it in from the camera truck. Okay. So this is a really important job. This is the first job in the camera department that I had. And like I said, that TV series was, the first job I did was 2 seasons, about 6 months each. And then the third TV series that I did as a loader was 11 months of shooting 6 days a week. So it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And this is a proving ground. If you can perform the loader's job and occasionally step up and perform the second AC's duties, it's a real fast track to a good job on a bigger project where you can either get a full-blown second AC position on a big show or maybe a first AC position on a small show, given your experience. So it's a great position to have, especially when you're working on TV, because you get to do a lot of stuff within the department and you get to learn very rapidly what the responsibilities are. These days, in the age of digital production, we have now a person on set called a DIT, or a digital imaging technician. Okay, and these individuals are here specifically to manipulate the image in camera in real time, sometimes, or they are applying lookup tables, which is basically the adjustments that we would make in post to the final files, but they have a way of non-destructively applying it to the raw footage coming out of the camera too, so you can look at that footage as though it has been color corrected and adjusted for exposure and everything. And then it goes to the editors and the post effects people as a raw file again. So the DIT is doing stuff with special software on set. He's also, in many cases, you can see there's a color parade over here on a color monitor, and he is adjusting the exposure in camera in real time. So there's probably some kind of cable snake that is running from the DIT's rig to the camera, so that the DIT can adjust the exposure for the DP. Maybe while the camera's actually rolling. He could do it while the camera's recording, or he could do it in between takes and make the adjustments here. A lot of times they'll do that if the camera's on a techno crane or something working up high, so that they don't have to keep bringing the crane down and scoping it in, so the ACs can get in and make adjustments to the camera. They'll let the DIT make the exposure adjustments at the DIT station, and then the cinematographer will go to the DIT station and look at the rehearsals on the DIT's monitor, so he can see it under full color correction and lookup tables and everything like that, to gauge the color and the lighting and to make sure things are happening the way the DP wants them to happen in terms of lighting performance, exposure, camera performance, and so forth. Because what you see is what you get. What you see is what is being recorded. So it's not like the days of film anymore, where there was a little bit of mystery about what was done in camera and recorded that was only revealed once the film stock was developed. We don't develop anything anymore. There's no photochemical process, so it's all happening in real time. So we can actually look at the digital image as it's coming out of the camera on a color correct monitor through some software, and we can do stuff to the image even as it's being recorded at the DIT station. So that's a lot of power. That's a lot of control. Sometimes it's a little scary and it feels like a lot of responsibility. And sometimes it's a very liberating feeling, because you have a lot more control and a lot less unknown and a lot less anxiety that you had in the days of film. In the days of film, we had to wait for the stuff to get developed, and usually that was done overnight. So whatever you shot, say on a Monday, you wouldn't know if there was a problem until Tuesday, and probably Tuesday at lunchtime. So if the film had gotten scratched from a magazine, or if the film was improperly exposed, or if there was a defect in the film from manufacturing, like there was mold in the emulsion, or the emulsion had been heat damaged, you don't know until the stuff's been developed and they look at it at the lab. They watch your film played back in a special projector at 90 frames a second, and they quickly scan over the film stock to see if there's any problems, and then they'll create a lab report that is sent to production, and the DP usually gets that in an interoffice mail envelope by lunchtime. And there's some kind of meeting and discussion at lunch if there's been a problem with the development process. But we don't have all those problems with the digital world now. If you look at the monitor on set at the DIT station and you think to yourself, you know, that lighting looks a little dark, or the exposure looks a little dark, you can make that adjustment in real time and know that the corrections that you have put into effect are going to generate the results that you want, because you can see the effect on the monitor. And that's a huge, huge change from the age of film. And that reality has only been available to us for the last 8 years. Okay. Even as close as 8 years ago, we were still shooting big budget stuff, television and feature films were still being shot on film stock, not on digital cameras. So this is a recent development, but it is, like I said, it's very empowering in a lot of ways, because the digital medium is allowing us to have more verification in real time that our images are exactly the way we want them to look. There's no more waiting overnight for the lab. There's no more hoping and praying that there wasn't an unforeseen accident. We know exactly what we have, so that when we end a day of shooting, we've seen everything happen on the monitors. And unless somebody accidentally erases a hard drive, we're good. We know what we've got. And then the DIT, so this particular individual at the end of every day, they have seen every data card that's come out of the camera. They've copied it, probably copied it a couple of times, so that they create redundant copies that can go to the producers, can go to the editors, can go to the special effects people, and everybody gets a copy of the day's work. That never happened before either. That was an added expense that had to be manufactured at the lab after the original negative had been developed. They develop the negative, and then they create positive work print from that, and then they have to copy all of that and generate copies for the editors and the special effects people, the producers, so they can watch dailies. All of that stuff had to be done at added expense in the days of film. We don't deal with any of that anymore. A lot of it is being handled by this person right here, the DIT. Okay, so it's happening on set in real time. That's a huge, huge change and benefit to the industry. Okay, this guy right here, I don't know if you can see that clearly or not. This is the Steadicam operator, right? This is behind the scenes on the film Birdman. So there's Michael Keaton, there's Mr. Inarritu there. This is the B camera / Steadicam operator, Chris, and he's lensing a shot, and they're watching on a wireless monitor right here on the sofa, okay? Once upon a time, the Steadicam was a day higher. So it was an expensive specialty piece of gear, usually came with its own operator, and that individual and his equipment would be hired on a daily basis, on a shot-by-shot basis, and usually on and off rental on the same day, get that person out, because their rate was much higher than the other camera people and the other camera gear. But nowadays, costs have come down, times have changed. The Steadicam is playing more and more of a role in filmmaking. And so the Steadicam operator might be on the job full-time as the B camera operator / Steadicam operator. Okay. And then they have a pay as used, we call it pay as used contract for the Steadicam. So if the operator is only working the B camera on a particular day, they get the B camera operator's rate. But if there's Steadicam work, their rate changes to the Steadicam rate for that shot or for that day. and the B camera operator has, you know, a little bit of a pay bump when they do the Steadicam work. Okay. The advantage of Steadicam in a movie like Birdman, for instance, look at the size of this room, right? It's a pretty cramped situation. If you get a big dolly in there and everything, you're going to see a dolly here in a second. You get a big camera dolly in there and some rails to do a nice smooth gliding shot with the dolly. By the time you put all that gear in there and all the grips that have to be in there to operate the dolly and then the lighting and all this stuff happening, there's no room for actors and director, right? So the Steadicam is a very liberating piece of gear, and the fact that you don't need anything but the rig, which is the operator is wearing, and the operator himself. So, you know, that footprint becomes very, very small and very workable in small practical sets. In other words, sets that are in real locations, not built on stage. On stage, we have the flexibility, for instance, of building a 4-wall set. And if it's really small and compact and we need to get a long lens shot, you know, if we're looking this way and there's a wall behind us, you know, I'll have the grips remove that wall so the camera can get back and get those long lens shots. And since we're not looking in that direction, we don't even know. And then when we have to turn around and look in that direction, the grips put the wall back in and you never know that it was missing in the first place. That's the flexibility of shooting on stage. But here in an actual theater, for instance, if they're going to shoot in this green room, they can't move a wall because it's a real building, right? With a real ceiling and real walls. So, you know, in the interest of space and time, I think the Steadicam is a really good idea on a movie like that. So here is Chris Harhoff, and he's operating B camera / Steadicam for the film Birdman. Okay, so that brings us to this guy. Okay. This young man is the camera intern or the camera trainee. Okay. Now, this is kind of a complex position because on a major feature film that has a union contract where everybody working on that film is a member of the IATSE, the trainees are not just anybody. They didn't get the job just walking in off the street. It's not somebody's nephew and it's not somebody's buddy, right? This person has to be a card carrying member of Local 600 in order to work with the camera equipment on a major feature film. But if it's a low budget film or a low budget TV show, maybe, or a commercial that doesn't have a union contract, a lot of times the camera interns might be a young person from the local camera a film school. And it's a person who maybe is majoring in cinematography or somebody who has, you know, who's getting a film degree, whose focus is camera work. And they, you know, the local low budget producer might approach the school and see if the school has interns that can work on their movie because they usually don't pay the interns. And so the notion is the interns, they don't get paid, but they get experience of working on an actual film. And then they pick people who have, you know, interest in specific departments, and they try to, you know, get some free help for a small local low budget film. In those cases, you can learn a lot and get a lot of practical experience as a camera trainee or a camera intern. This may very well be, for those of you who want to pursue a career in the camera department, this very well may be your opportunity of access. If you were to move to, say, Atlanta or Albuquerque or Austin, Texas, where they do a fair amount of non-union work, you can get these jobs fairly readily. If you have a decent resume and you have, you know, a good record in school, and you have maybe somebody, you know, to use as a reference, you give your resume to the probably the first AC or the production manager of the film, and then the UPM will give your resume to the first AC, and they might very well hire you on that film as a camera intern. Okay, so that's a way into the industry, specifically into a specific department like the camera department. It's not an easy path, but it is possible. And if you land a job like camera intern on a TV series, for instance, and that series keeps you busy for 6 months, at the end of the 6 months, at the end of your service on that show, you will have more practical experience and more of an idea of what the industry is and how it works and what you want for yourself in terms of a career than you ever would have gained in film school. Okay. The field is the ultimate teacher. Okay. So this would be a job you might want to think about pursuing when you get out of school after you've graduated, if the camera department is where you feel like you belong, right? I was never a camera intern. I started as a loader because I may have told you this before, but when I was very, very young, I worked as a photographer for a studio in New York. So I had some camera experience already. Granted, it wasn't motion picture experience, but once you've handled lenses and you understand exposure and you know what the photographic process is, they can fast track you in the camera department if they want to, right? And so I was with a group of people who were interested in my advancement. And so they hired me as a loader, and everything worked out really well. I went from loader to second AC to first AC. And then I left the camera department for a number of years. But when I returned, many years later, I returned as a cinematographer to the camera department. So it's a great rank and file to get in on, especially in a place like Atlanta, where you might work with a crew that goes from job to job. That solves your employment question. Will I ever work again, and what will it be? And it will help you with your sort of upward mobility and your experience, getting more credits on your resume, getting more experience, working your way up through the ranks. And then, before you realize it, 10 years have passed behind you, and you're working on a regular basis, and you're doing the thing that you never thought was possible. So this is where it starts. It starts with this position right here. Okay. So if you want to get into the world of major feature production at the studio level where the IATSE is involved, then you have to get into some kind of trainee program. Local 600, I have to find out if they're doing trainees in 600 and how they handle it now. Years ago, the local in Los Angeles was 644, I believe. And the local in New York City was local 52, I believe, or 652. New York had a trainee program. So if you wanted to get into the IATSE in the camera department, you could do it. There was an actual pathway to membership and experience and so forth in the New York local. And you could do that as a camera intern or camera trainee, an IA camera trainee. And you had to take a test. It was 100 questions. And if you passed the test, and you could only miss, I think it was 7 questions. So you had to get 93 right, kind of like taking the naturalized citizens test. You had to answer 100 questions and you can only miss 7%. And if you passed that test and they liked your resume and you were the right kind of fit for their, the type of folks that work in the camera department, you could get a job as a trainee on a major movie and start your career right there at the ground floor, earning your work hours and your health hours and your pension hours and everything as a trainee. And then you just, you go from job to job under the IEA, under the auspices of the union. So it can be a very rewarding and lengthy and lucrative career if you are, in the least bit compelled to pursue it. I know that some of you don't have those kinds of career aspirations, that you have other objectives. And all of that is fine. I'm just showing you what the big boys are doing on the big movies, in case you're curious. And then you can always take this model and scale it down to whatever you're working on, right? So you might not, maybe on your class projects, you certainly need a DP, right? But you might not need an operator. You probably want a focus puller, and you might want a second AC. So you might want 3 people. You don't have enough work to keep a loader busy, right? And you don't really need a DIT at UCF to do your projects with. You're just going to handle your post-production work after you've shot your project. So everything you're going to do is going to be in camera, but you will have monitor verification. You just might not have software manipulation and what we call black box control on the set of your class projects, because it's a complex workflow that you don't need at this level yet. And you probably won't have a Steadicam operator because UCF doesn't have any Steadicam equipment for you to borrow anyway. And you probably won't have an intern. So if you're working on a low budget TV show, maybe down in Miami, or you go up to Atlanta and you work on a non-union TV show, you might have a DP and an operator, a first AC and a second AC, and you will probably more than likely have a DIT, and you might even have an intern. Okay, so you might have, you know, the majority of these individuals, but not all. So, and then of course, if you're on a documentary, it might just be you behind the camera, right? So there's lots of different footprints in the industry now. I'm showing you the tentpole version, and then you can extract what interests you or concerns you the most from the, what I call the Apex model. Okay. So that's the camera department in a nutshell. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Any questions or comments that you want to make based on what we've seen here? No one? Everybody knows you're all DPs already?
I have a question actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually typed it in the chat earlier, but for what you were saying about the radio names, like saying Victor or Franklin, are those specific set names for representing the letters?
Yeah, they're pretty common. In fact, you could probably Google it, maybe wiki it, and look for like ham radio operators phonetic alphabet. You know, Google that, and you'll get A is Alpha, B is Baker, C is Charlie, D is David or Delta, E is Echo or Edward. F is usually Franklin in both languages. G for George. They skip H. H is a problematic letter anyway. It sounds like other letters when you speak it. That's why they're using these phonetic codes in the first place. If you were just to say V57F, you know, on a muddled recording, or maybe there's background noise or something that happened while you said that on camera, the editor might be listening to that clip, playing it back and forth and say, did she say V or T? Did she say F or S? I don't know. I don't have it's a tail slate. So I got to go all the way to the end of the clip to see what it is. I have the audio in the beginning as they were hitting the record. They said, you know, V57F, and then they ran away, and then the car jumped the ramp, and I got to look for 5 minutes of clip to figure out what that was. So we say Victor instead of V, because Victor is not, you know, you can't confuse that with T. Victor. 57 Franklin, take one, right? It's very distinct. So if you Google that, you know, and I mean, there's a very funny video on YouTube right now, and I think it's the second AC from what movie was it? Gosh, I forget. I want to say it was Game of Thrones or something. And the second AC was using silly names for all the letters of the alphabet, and not using really, you know, the standard terminology. And as long as nobody's offended by it or has a problem with it, you know, and as long as the editors understand what you're saying, you know, it's not a big deal. It's not something that if you don't do it a certain way, you're going to be fired or you're wrong and it's terrible. It's just that the radio operator's phonetic alphabet's been around for, 100 years, right? And a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of the traditions and the procedures that we use in the film industry are, passed on from generation to generation. But early on in the industry, a lot of the people that came into the film business to do these jobs, like camera assistants and grips and electricians, they were in the military. And so some of this stuff, or the assistant directors were in the military maybe, and they got all their managerial skills and their logistical skills from being, say, in the Army. And so they already had all that training sort of built into their experience, in their memory banks. And so that's where that comes from. The 6-minute clock that the film industry uses is right out of military training. So there's 10 clicks of the military clock. Every click is worth 6 minutes. And so if call time is 6 a.m. in the morning, At 6:07, if you're not on set and the ADs haven't seen you and checked your name off, you're considered late and they dock your pay, right? But if you come in at 6:03, they let it slide, right? So we use the 6-minute clock, and that's a holdover from military training that a lot of times the ADs will have, the assistant directors. So it's the same thing with the slate alphabet, you know, and really it's just so the editor can understand what's being said on the recording, especially if you're trying to run out of the shot really quickly. And so you say it over your shoulder, or you say it really, really fast, and maybe you jumble your words or whatever. You know, C and F can be really, really clearly misunderstood if you don't try something like, you know, a phonetic alphabet. So that's what it's all about. It's more of a tradition than anything else. But it's a lot of fun, you know, and it adds a little bit to the swagger if you know the slate speak, you know. So that's all that it really is. It's not a big deal. But I remember when I first got that responsibility full time and I was paid as a second AC, you know, my pay scale went up about 20% when I went from loader to second AC in the union. It was a pay grade upgrade, you know. So that was a really big deal. You know, not only were you making more money, but now you had to do this thing that was the, you know, iconographic image of that job description is, you know, you're operating the slate. You used to call them clapper boys in the old days, right? No offense to the ladies in the room, but you know, there weren't many women in the film industry working these technical positions in the 20s and 30s when all these slang terms were getting thrown around and coined for the first time. They had a graphite slate and they were using chalk, which is where the term slate comes from in the first place. They were using an actual slate tablet with chalk to label the fronts of all of their, or the heads of all of their takes. That's where the term slate came from in the first place, right? So and then it had the sticks on top and they were clapping the sync point. So they called those people clapper boys, and they called the loaders loaders. And if the show didn't have enough money to have a clapper boy and a loader, you were the clapper loader, right? You were doing both jobs, right? And they called you clapper loader. Unfortunately, you didn't get paid any more for it. You only got paid 20% more if you were the full-blown second AC, right? So my second TV series, I was just the loader on that one. On my first TV series, I was the loader. On my fourth movie, I was a clapper loader. I was doing both things because we didn't have enough money for an actual loader and a separate second AC. So I got boned on that job, but it was okay because any experience was good experience at that point in my career. So I was happy to do whatever they asked me to. I was just happy to be getting paid. So, but that's what it is. A lot of this is traditional behavior, but it's highly regarded traditional traditions in the industry. And a lot of people like to maintain those traditions out of a sense of respect for, you know, the generations that precede us. You know, every new generation that gets into the film industry is standing on the shoulders of people who made advances in some way, shape, or form that augment and affect your career as such that it is today. So, and in many of those cases, it has to do with benefits and pay scales and things that you receive now in the industry that were hard fought and won benefits by individuals who are long since gone and retired or died off from the industry. So always remember that, you know, while you're new to it, you are part of a long-standing tradition of people that have come before you that have worked very, very hard and contributed and created and given you some of your favorite movies that you might remember as a child or your parents remember when they were children. And the wheel keeps turning, right? So at the studio level, there's a lot of stock placed in our traditions. Everybody loves it. They love taking part in it, and they love the feeling of being part of something that's very, very old and very, very rigid and successful, like the film industry, right? So that, you know, that's it. I think I took you a long way around the block on that answer, didn't I? Anybody else got any thoughts or questions, comments?
Yeah, I got two questions. Going back to the full lecture. Oh my gosh, I forgot what I was like. It was pertaining to the C-Spot, the two you were asking about for the assignment, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and second of all, you mentioned how about the studios and how it's easy to put a wall back up if it was taken down for a shot.
Yeah.
And compared to it. My question is like for like say something for like on the highway, how would you set up a shot like that?
Set up a shot on the highway of what? Of cars going by or
With cars going by with the cars, like one of those high like for example, like the Italian Job or National Treasure, for example, one of those moments.
All right. So if cars are just driving by the camera, you can do that static on a set of legs or tripod, right? If you want to be moving with the action, then the camera has to be moving while the cars are moving. That's more complex. That's done with a system we call a camera car. So we'll have a truck that has been modified. A lot of times they'll use like a 1-ton pickup truck, for instance, and they'll tear that thing down and they'll rebuild it from the frame up to be a camera platform. And so it'll be a special truck. We call it a camera car, although it's a truck, right? And you'll mount cameras to it, and then you'll have crew ride on it. And then that car might pace or follow or lead what we call the picture car. And the picture car has either the stunt driver in it or the actual actor. If we're shooting car to car and looking through the windshield at who's driving, and it's a frame that's tight enough for us to be able to ID who that is, it can't be the stunt driver at that point. It's got to be the really. Okay. Remember that shot I told you in the first, I showed you in my first presentation on week 1 of Tom Cruise and the little Peugeot with the
I remember that.
Cameras rigged all over it. You can either rig the cameras to the car, the actual car, or you can rig the cameras to a camera car and shoot what we call car to car. Cameras.
Yeah, I also saw like a few of them.
The other.
Yeah, I also saw that like someone like on Apple's latest commercial for their iPhone, they actually had a bunch of camera rigs and they set it up like a bunch of movie cameras. I mentioned how you, and I know how you, and I remember you mentioning that those aren't, but even though they're meant to simulate that, they aren't actual movie cameras because movie cameras are still much better.
You talking about the iPhone commercial where they got the little suction cups on the hood of the car?
Yes.
You can do that now if you got a good cell phone with a good camera in it. I mean,
I was talking about like the latest phone, but even still.
Well, in my day when I was in the camera department doing that kind of work, that's right, your iPhone. We were putting film cameras on the car, and if you understand that a film camera, even stripped down to its smallest build, might still weigh 40 or 50 pounds, right? So that object has to be mounted on the car securely enough to where it's not going to tumble off, and it has to be locked down so that that frame that you set for it doesn't move or wander at all with the vibration of the car, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to have for every angle you want to get. So if you got a bank heist scene where they're hauling ass down the road, getting away from the cops with money flying out the window, and the two criminals are, woo, we made it, we did it, right? And you need a single on the driver, you need a single on the passenger, and you need a 2-shot of both people through the windshield at the same time. And then you might want raking, we call raking overs, through the driver's window, through the passenger's window of the two people at an angle, right? That's 5 angles on a car. You can do it, but that's a lot of weight and that's a lot of rigging that has to be done to that car. And it's an art form. It's the first job that I did when I left the camera department. I rigged cameras because I knew how to handle the devices, you know? So it's just a question of mounting those devices to the vehicles and getting the shot. And that's kind of a lost art form. That's why I liked that shot I showed you of the latest Mission Impossible, because they were doing it old school, right? So in the streets in Europe, they can't shoot in many cases car to car because those streets are so narrow. You're lucky to get 1 car through there at a time, let alone 2 driving in parallel, right? So in that case, they mount the cameras right to the hero car, right to the picture car, because you don't need to see the outside of the vehicle for most of the shots that you're going to assemble into the scene of Tom Cruise's getting away from the bad guys. You only need a few shots that show the vehicle driving by in real time. You get those with a different car, and then you take the double of the hero car, which transportation department usually has at least two of the protagonist's main car, if not more. Okay. One of those is a rig car, and that'll get cameras mounted to it. And then the best one, the one that's in the best shape, picture shape, is what we call the hero car. And that's the one you'll see in wide shots. And that's the one that they'll see, posed in certain shots in the background or whatever. Then they might have a second car that's a backup to the hero car in case they wreck the hero car. Like on Too Fast and Too Furious, we had, I think, we had four. So there was two guys, the two heroes in the movie. One guy's driving the green car, the other guy's driving the purple car, and we had four of each of those cars.
Oh, because some of them where they just tumble out of control and just.
Yeah, because in some of those shots they were driving in real time. The girl who drove the pink car, the first time in the first scene that they put her in there to drive the car, she wrecked it because she wasn't old enough to drive, believe it or not. And she didn't have a driver's license. She never drove a car before. The guys in the transport department had to teach her how to drive on that movie. She wrecked the first one, and they only had two of that car. So after she wrecked the first one, everybody was really nervous to work with that kid whenever she was behind the wheel, because that was the only other version of that car that we had. And if they wrecked the second one, that was it. They were going to have to figure out how to write that out of the movie because there was no more pink. I forget what that thing was. There was no more pink glitter car, So they usually have multiple versions of that. So we had a version of both of the hero cars that we could mount to. The grips would oftentimes, in fact, the grips, I forget if it was Paul's car or if it was his partner there was I forget, I'm drawing a blank now, I forget his name. The grips had one of those cars, and they were going to rig some lights for us in the car, and they had to screw a piece of gear to the dashboard, and when they did, the screw went right through the brain of the car. It happened to be right behind the dashboard, and when they screwed it in, the screw shorted out the brain, and that car became useless. That car never even made it out of the warehouse. And it was already dead. So usually there's going to be at least 2 or 3 or more of the hero cars, so that whatever problems come up, they can be dealt with. But shooting car to car and mounting cameras on cars is something you'll see on big movies a lot. And you'll see them on expensive TV shows as well, but it's a lost art form, and they don't let just anybody do it, because if one of those cameras takes a tumble, you're going to eat $250,000 of investment, because the insurance is, going to have a massive deductible on a film camera is a minimum of $300,000. And the Area Alexas, if a full build on an Area Alexa, the body is $50,000. The lens is another $60,000. There's 110 right there without accessories. You're $150,000 in the hole if that camera takes a tumble off the car at high speed. So you have to be trained to do it. And usually it's a pretty experienced grip that's going to do that for you.
Yeah. Speaking of big budget movies, there's because I just saw the trailer for one that's coming out later in I think March on HBO Max. You're familiar with the MonsterVerse, right?
The which?
The MonsterVerse, which is with Godzilla, Kong.
Oh yeah.
That's the MonsterVerse.
Godzilla versus Kong, the one that's coming.
Yeah, the one that's coming, the final installment, supposedly.
Man, King Kong's not that big. Godzilla was way bigger than King Kong.
They beefed him up.
I'm reaching back to the old Japanese days where the guys were in the rubber suits,
Oh yeah.
King Kong was not as big as they're showing him in the new movie. Not back in the old days. They're taking some creative license.
Yeah.
But
King Kong was American. King Kong's American.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So if I do cinematography 2 in the fall, if we're back to face, I might do a rigging class. I might show you guys how to rig cameras to cars in cinematography 2.
I might take a look into that maybe in the summer if I can get that.
They'll let me. The insurance has some very particular criteria and restrictions. They may or may not let me do that. I might have to do it on the sly, but I'll show you guys how to rig at least a hostess tray, we call it. So you can rig a camera to the car door, go tearing off down the highway with a hostess tray. I might be here in the summer, so I might go into cinematography 2 a little bit early. I don't know if we're going to do it or not. It might be in the catalog, but if we're not face to face, then I'm not going to do it, because there's no way I can teach that class in a forum like this. It's just, you have to put your hands on stuff eventually. So
Considering how we've gone from like stop motion to basically real life sets all the way to CGI now, how do you think that with CGI we'd be able to do shots like the big shots from like far away?
oh, I mean, a lot of the shots from far away are all CG now anyway. In fact, car commercials now, they have there is a software program. It's a two-part process. They put something in a car. It's like a sender, like a GPS almost, which tells the software where that car is in three-dimensional space within the frame. And then the software, and this car is like an ordinary car. It's not the hero car. It's not the Corvette or the Chevy or the whatever the car commercial's about, right? They actually digitally put that car in there over the skin of the car that has this device in it. Okay. And so
Okay.
car commercials now might consist of a plate that's just the background that's been photographed. And then this car is going to run through it with this device in it to map it out in 3D space. And then they're going to put the actual product car digitally into that frame. And you never had the real car to begin with. They don't even shoot the real car anymore for the high-end car commercials. So
that sucks.
In a way it does, because, well, like somebody like me, I remember when we did the real thing, you know, when we had the real car and we went out to the dry lake bed out in Lancaster and we would shoot car commercials and music videos out there. Right. And it was a lot of fun, you know. But now it's all about smaller crews and quicker turnaround times, and they can do so much with digital now. We don't have to do things quite the same way anymore, but it's neat to know how it's done, because if you're working on a low budget show where you don't have a post-production budget to do all this CG in the first place, you can do stuff in camera that's still pretty amazing if you know how to do it. So I like teaching a little bit of the old ways so that, you know, you have some arrows in your quiver when you get out there into the world. And you know, the first jobs you're going to get are going to be low budget movies. These people aren't going to have any money. They're going to be lucky to be making the movie in the first place, let alone have the kind of budgets that the big boys throw at a problem, you know, on, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like, what's this going to cost? Another $1 million? Go ahead, you know, do it. It looks good. It's going to enhance the scene. Go ahead, spend another $1.5 million on whatever that is, or border that gear for $500,000. No big deal, right? That might be your entire budget on a low budget feature. So if you got some tricks up your sleeve that you can do in camera that will add production value to what you're filming, and not require CG, those are good skills to have. So, you know, one of those things is a hostess tray and a hood mount.
Kind of sad in that regard. Wish we could go back. I just remember reading about back a long time ago when the indies were dominant. I just wish we could go back to that, you know?
Yeah, me too. In a way, we have in a small way we have, because the low budget stuff now, and I, you know, quite frankly, low budget now is $40 million. You know, in the days you're talking about, low budget was $5 million, right? So even on a $40 million movie now, they're doing things the way we used to do in the old days, because that $40 million doesn't go very far when the director's making 5 or 10 million and the actor's making 10 million, you know, and the post-production budget is, you know, 5 million, and they have an ad budget the size of the production budget. You know, 40 million doesn't go very far. By the time they get down to the money they're actually spending on making the movie, that might be $5 or $6 million, and the rest of it is all above the line expenses. That's the reality of now. There's a lot of waste in the studio system now, which is why a lot of these people are you know, looking for independent outlets for their creative goals and aspirations, because 5 million in the indie world spends like 5 million, you know. In the feature studio world, 5 million spends like $500,000 by the time you add in all the expenses. So it's a little bit different way of thinking about movie making at that level.
Thank you.
Sure, sure. Anybody else?
Can I ask a question if you have the time?
No, we're done. No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. With the assignment the other day, I just had a question. Like, you know, the big Hollywood model. So do they want like more natural cinematographers like Lubeski and Deakins, or what about cinematographers who bring their own style, like a Robert Yauman or like a Vittorio Statoro,
Bob
or
Yeoman, not a young man. Okay, Bob Yeoman is shooting for.
Yeah, I know that. I know.
He's not a young guy, but he's got a wonderful style that fits really well with Wes Anderson's style, and they work well together. And so they have a
He's
lot.
done other work too. I know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Not only Wes Anderson. So.
Oh yeah, he goes back a ways, Bob. So, but yeah, they are looking for fresh. They're always looking for a new point of view on what is being shot.
Is it hard? Would you say it's harder?
Not in the age of digital, because we want and need more content now than ever before. There's more channels on television, and it's not just TV anymore. It's the internet, and it's gas pumps, and it's the theaters still. And, you know, there's a lot of need right now for content. So there's a lot of opportunity. So the only problem is there's more people want to do it now. All of a sudden, everybody wants to make movies. When I was your age and I was getting into the business, it was maybe a third of the size that it is now. And it was a little harder to know who the people were that were involved and where it was happening, and finding those things and gaining access was really hard. And so, but now it's everywhere. So, I mean, you could make films working for, like I said, Florida Hospital, you know, it's maybe not where you want to end up, but it's could be a good place to start. It's a paycheck, working with cameras, lights, and grip gear, right? Where else are you going to do that and get paid, right? So you have to sort of open your mind to the possibilities now of what it means to be working in the film industry, and then direct your focus and your effort. If you want this model that I'm showing you, this is a certain kind of career. It's a studio career, right? If you want that, there's certain ways to do it and go about it. If you want to do the independent route for a while and put your stuff out there on internet festivals and live streaming services and YouTube and stuff, and, you know, hope that you get noticed, that's another approach. And then you're a little bit more free to be creative and be whatever you want to be, because it's your stuff and you're paying. You know, the minute they ask you to do something for them and they're the ones paying, that's when you start taking a lot of orders, and people just start telling you what they want and what they want you to do. And you have a little bit less creative freedom the more money is at stake, until you get to, you know, believe it or not, on a $200 million movie, a lot of these people don't have much of a say as to should it be red or should it be blue, because they've already done, you know, research on red or blue. They've already had test audiences on red or blue. They've already had two other movies that one was red and one was blue, and they got the box office receipts to support whether red was better or blue was better. And they got all this analysis and all these producers that are going to tell you which was better, red or blue. And then they're going to make a choice for $200 million that it's red. And if you don't agree with red, then don't take the job, because it's going to be red. They're going to have their way. But on a little low budget feature, you know, you might say, I don't like red or blue. I want it to be green. And you can do it because it's your dime, you know, and then, you know, hope that you get recognized or noticed. You know, it's not impossible. It's just it's a little bit like winning the lottery at that point, because you're hoping that you get seen at random amongst a huge volume of content that's out there, and everybody's struggling to be noticed. You know, so you become a little bit obscure at that point. But so I always tell people, look, whatever you're going to end up doing, try to do what you like for money. Don't tend bar and then make movies on the weekend, hoping that someday you get to do this for real. Look for jobs making movies, and then learn a skill in film school that you can trade for a paycheck. and then do it for a living. That's possible too. And then if what you're doing for a living isn't exactly the job you want, bide your time, meet the right people, be on the inside and look for the opportunity. When the opportunity strikes, seize it, right? But you can't seize it from the outside when you don't know what's happening in the first place. You got to be on the inside, right? So get in there in any way possible, and then move around once you're inside. That's one way. Okay. You can try to get discovered on the outside, but that can be a very lonely and insular existence until you're noticed or somebody gives you some attention, because you're all competing with an unseen entity that may or may not want what you're doing. And you'll never know if they've looked at you or not unless they make a decision to bring you in. My friend Gail Tattersall shot the TV series House. And he told me a story one time of a kid that was the son of, how did this work? I think he was a son of a producer or a location manager or something. And on the weekends, this guy would go home to Northern California to be with the family. And then during the week, come back down to LA, and they were shooting the TV show. So this guy's kid was all into skateboarding, and he got the kid a little handy cam for Christmas, and the kid would go to the skate park up in Palo Alto or wherever the heck they lived. And he would shoot his buddies at the skate park doing stuff. And this kid developed a technique where he was getting some really amazing footage board to board in real time in the skate park. And the kid's images were actually really good. And somebody saw the kid's video, or this guy was showing off, oh, look what my kid does on YouTube. And they said, holy crap, we have a scene in our next episode that could use a camera operator with these skills. Do you think your kid would want to come down and operate the camera? And he said, I don't know, let's run it by him, and the kid came down, and I'm pretty sure that kid's a Steadicam operator now in the business from something that he put on YouTube. So that's like capturing lightning in a bottle, right? But it does still happen every once in a while. The likelihood is pretty slim, but it does still happen every once in a great while. And it's a great story when it does, because it's like, we all want to believe that, you can still be good at something and get discovered, right? That's the actor's dream, right? They're working in the diner, waiting tables, but they want to be discovered as the next great, leading man or leading lady. That was always the Hollywood dream in the old days. We still have that dream. Some of us are still holding out for those dreams, right? And it's nice to know that every once in a while it actually happens the way we think it should. There's lots of ways to approach this problem, but whatever you do, make sure that you're happy doing it, so that wherever you end up in 30 years, when you're my age, looking back at what you've done, make sure you're happy about it and proud of the work that you did. And then there's no problem. The money works itself out. The job works itself out. But if you spent 30 years and you were unhappy the whole time, and you never made any money, and you never got famous, and you never got to work on anything that anybody but your closest friends had seen, you might feel differently about it. So you got to go out there and fight for your opportunities, and make sure that everything that you do, you're creatively and spiritually happy with, so that looking back over your career, you won't be dissatisfied with the amount of time that you spent trying to get in, trying to get involved, and trying to stay busy, because it's going to take up a lot of your time. That's the only thing. Just be careful of that, and everything else will sort itself out.
Yeah, I feel like I just got a whole life lesson in that answer.
Sorry about that.
No, it's you do you.
Anybody else?
Great.
Feelings, questions, comments?
In what situations would a first AC want to use a tape measure to measure the distance between the camera and the actor?
We always used what we called a soft tape, which was it was made out of cloth, and it had a little leather case, and you'd pull it out. And the reason why we used a soft tape is because you wouldn't cut your hands. You could let it drop on the floor. People could walk on it. When you pull a tape across the room to get a focus mark from the camera, one end of that tape is attached to the focus lug, right? Or the plane of focus lug on the camera. And then you're running that tape out maybe 12 or 15 feet and you're going right to the eye of the person you're shooting, right? And that's your precision focus, right? And people are walking through the set and they're trying to do their thing. So sometimes you might see somebody coming through the set and they're barreling in with a prop or something. They don't see your tape stretched across the room. I just dropped the thing on the floor and they could walk on the cloth tape and it's no big deal. And then pick it up so I don't trip that individual or get them all hung up in my tape, right? And so we would use a soft tape for that kind of stuff, for the day-to-day stuff. The hard tape, we call it the hard tape, and it was always a Stanley, like a Fat Max, you know, where the thing is more than an inch wide, because that was the most rigid metal tape. Like a half inch or a 3/4 inch wide tape measure is junk, because you run it out about 2 feet and then it folds in half and it doesn't hold itself in the air. But the wide Fat Max, you could stretch that thing out, you know, upwards of 6 or 7 feet without it snapping on you. Now, if we were in a handheld mode where the camera operator's got the Panaflex on his shoulder and he's panning around the room and he's running around with this thing on his shoulder, and you want to get a quick focus mark at, you know, one point on the floor where he moves forward and gets a shot and then moves back, you know, you could use that hard tape to just sort of stick it out there and see what the distance was and then adjust the lens accordingly in between takes. And then just, you know, hit the button and it retracts all of, and then clip it right to your belt. And you've got the tape measure right there and you would use it for that. So we would use the tape measure for Steadicam work and for handheld work. Or if you're sitting on the dolly and you got the camera mounted on the dolly and the operator's on the dolly and you're on the dolly as the focus puller, rather than, you know, if you're going to use the soft tape, sometimes the dolly op would not want the AC to get off the dolly, because it might have been a weight distribution thing, because those seats could swing way out and the operator might be on one side of the camera and he's swung way out. Maybe he's got a big gut, or, you know, his position, he likes to be swung way out away from the camera. So he's kind of out off the left side of the dolly. And so I'd have to be on the other side of the camera, on the other side of the dolly, to counterbalance the operator. And so I might have to swing out so the leverage is equal. That dolly operator would say, don't you get off this dolly. If you do, the whole thing's going to fly off the track that way and we're going to crush the operator on the other side. So in that case, I'd have to have the second AC pull my soft tape out for me, or I could just extend out the hard tape because it wouldn't, you know, fold in half, and I could get a measurement if it was reasonably close to where I was on the dolly. So it would all depend on what the shot was, whether I used the soft tape or the hard tape.
Does it just take practice to get used to knowing what the distance is and then knowing how much I need to adjust on the camera to get the right focus?
Yeah, we used to geek out all the time. Like if, you know, if the ADs gave the crew a 5-minute break because the director wanted to go in the set and rehearse with the actors and he'd kick everybody out, you know, so we'd all be kind of standing around. That's when the first AD would say, smoke if you got them, take a 5. You know, most of the crew would run over to craft service to see what they brought out from the crafty truck, you know, little hors d'oeuvres and snacks. The camera guys, we'd all geek out in the corner and we'd start going, how far do you think that cup of coffee is on the table from the camera right now? And we'd all guess. Sometimes we'd wager on it, you know, and then somebody would run a tape out and find out how far that thing was. And, you know, it was little games like that we would play with each other, but it would help you sharpen up your powers of observation, and you get real good at eyeballing stuff, we call it, you know. So you know, sometimes you get a cowboy director in there that thinks he's got a good vibe going with the actors, and the last thing he wants to do is stop. You know, they would get pissed off when we would tell them we had to reload the camera. Look, man, you know, you want to keep shooting, we need more film in the camera, you got to give me a minute to reload. And they would be like, oh, well, if you have to, go ahead. You know, well, yeah, I have to. You know, and so focus marks, nah, we're not stopping for that. If you can't do it, we'll get somebody in here who can. Oh shit, now you don't have time. They don't want to stop to let you get your marks. So if you kind of already had a sense of how far something was away, you know, you might not be given time to run a tape out. You got to go, baby, because the actor's already crying and they've already worked themselves up into a lather. And if you don't get that, if you don't record that in that moment when that actor is hot and ready to go, you might lose that moment of real, genuine reaction or emotion. And then you'll get the director really bent out of shape and mad. So sometimes they wouldn't let us stop and measure. And so we had to know. And we would do little tricks like, if you extend your arms all the way out in either direction, right? Do you know that fingertip to fingertip, that dimension is the same dimension as you are tall? So if you happen to be 6 feet, your outstretched arms in two directions is 6 feet. A lot of times what I would do is I'd run out really quick and I'd put my hand on the focus lug and I'd stretch the other one out and I'd stand out there and it's okay, that's 6 feet. And the actor's another 1.5 foot past my fingertips. That's 7.5 feet. Dial 7.5 on the lens and I'm ready, go. Turn the camera on, then they'd roll. And then if the actor would move, I would just ride the lens 6 inches this way, 6 inches that way. 6 inches this way, 6 inches that way. And if they walked a couple of feet to the table, oh, that table's 2.5 feet away, plus 6, 8.5 feet on the lens. And that's what we would do. And that's kind of that's another hidden art that people don't talk about in film school. I talk about it in cinematography too. We have a whole chapter where we just talk about, pulling focus and what that is and what that job is and what it feels like. And you get in there and do it. It's a hell of a job, but I'll tell you, even now I'm like all worked up. Oh my God, because you're in that moment when you're focusing that lens and the camera's rolling and the actors are acting. If you screw that up and you buzz the focus, it's there in the shot. That's part of the movie now, unless you do it again and they give you another opportunity. You're in that moment. It's one of the rare times when you are viscerally a part, truly a part of what is happening in that creative moment. Focusing, pushing the dolly, using an interactive light that is moving or doing something while the camera is rolling and you're recording that action on film. Those are interesting moments that when you're a part of it, it makes you truly a part of that movie forever. Whatever you did in that moment has been recorded and it's there forever. And it's an interesting feeling. It's a very gratifying feeling. And it's in those moments that you realize that most of the time, most of the day, your job feels just like, manufacturing or digging ditches or loading trucks and doesn't feel like making a movie. But then you get a moment like that after lunch in the quiet times on set with 2 actors and a director and a camera and everybody else was kicked out, go smoke. We need the privacy. And in those moments, you're truly a part of that movie. And it's a very interesting feeling. Very rewarding. Those are the moments that we live for. It's like hitting the perfect golf shot, You'll be out there slugging away all day, 125, over par, 90 degrees, and then you'll hit the perfect wedge onto the green and it rolls into the cup. And it's like a shot of adrenaline in the arm. You're so jazzed by that moment and you're so rewarded in that feeling that it brings you out again next weekend to spend another $50 in another round of golf where you want to bend your stuff in half and go to the bar out of frustration. It's those moments that keep us in the game. And there's a few jobs on set that you can have those moments, and focus pulling is one of them for sure. Pushing the dolly is another one, or Steadicam operator, because you're in the moment and whatever gets recorded is totally your fault, good or bad. It's a good feeling. That's neat that you brought that up. That's cool. Good question. Anybody else? Shall we adjourn? It's 8:00. We've done 2 hard hours, folks. Are you eager for more, or do you want to call it a day? Let's adjourn, shall we? Anybody second that motion? All right, then.
I second that motion.
Excellent. So no more questions, right? Everybody's pretty much good to go for your assignments and everything for next week. All right, then. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop my screen share now and stop my recording. Thanks very much for a good session.